The landlord grabbed Emma Sullivan's backpack off the porch and hurled it into the rain, then threw the deadbolt in her face while she was still begging. "Please, one more week. You've got till the count of 3 before I call the cops." She stood there in the downpour, 28 years old, 240 pounds, and nothing left in this world but wet clothes and a photograph in a plastic sleeve. 11 miles later, she knocked on the wrong door, or maybe the only right one, and asked a widowed father of 2 for one night. Just one. By sunrise, that man had built her a room. You'll want to see why. Comment the city you're watching from so I know how far this story travels, and subscribe, because what happens next changes everything. The rain came down on Ashland Creek, Ohio, like it had a grudge, and Michael Carter was 30 feet up a ladder in it because the roof over his daughter's bed had started to weep. "Dad!" Noah shouted from the porch. "Mom's bucket's full again." Michael didn't correct him. Noah was 10 and still called it Mom's bucket because Sarah had been the one who first set it under that leak 4 winters ago, back when there was still a Sarah to set buckets under things. "Dump it in the tub, bud, not the sink, the tub." Why not the sink? Because the sink drains slow and I don't have the money to fix the sink and the roof in the same month. Tub. Okay. Michael slapped another square of tar patch over the split shingle, knowing full well it would hold about as long as a promise made at 2 in the morning. 35 years old, 2 kids, a truck with 190,000 miles on it, a mortgage he was 2 payments behind on, and a foreman's job at Hollis Fabrication that had been under review since the spring layoffs. He came down the ladder slow because he'd learned the hard way that the last 3 rungs were the ones that got you. "Dad?" Lily was standing in the doorway in her pajamas, 7 years old, hair everywhere. "Somebody's at the front." "Nobody's at the front, honey. Nobody comes here." "Somebody knocked." "Probably the wind." "It knocked 3 times. Michael stopped. 3 knocks, soft ones. The kind you make when you already know the answer is going to be no. She was standing on his porch with her arms crossed over herself, like she was trying to take up less room in the world. Soaked through. Hair plastered flat. A gray backpack hanging off one shoulder, so waterlogged it had gone black. She was a big girl, heavy set, wide through the shoulders and hips, the kind of body strangers felt entitled to have opinions about, and she was shaking so hard Michael could hear her teeth. "I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. "I'm sorry. I knocked, and then I thought I shouldn't have. I'm sorry." "Ma'am?" "I'll go." "Ma'am, it's 41 degrees. She stopped on the top step. Didn't turn around all the way. Just enough for him to see one eye. "I know," she said. Michael stood in his own doorway with the warm air pouring out around him and rain hammering the porch roof, and something in his chest going tight in a way he hadn't felt since the hospital. "What do you need?" he said. "Nothing." Nobody knocks on a stranger's door at 9 at night for nothing. Her jaw worked. He watched her fight it, watched her lose. "One night," she said. "That's all, just indoors, anywhere, a garage, a shed. I don't need a bed, I don't need food, I don't need money. I'll be gone before sunrise, and you'll never see me again. I swear to God." "Where's your car?" "I don't have one." "Where'd you walk from?" She looked at her shoes. "Where'd you walk from, Madame? Bellamy Street." Michael did the math and didn't like the answer. "Bellamy Street's in Dayton." "Yes." "That's 11 miles. 12 and a half if you go around the interstate, which you have to, because of the fence." He stared at her. "How long's that take?" 4 hours and some," she said quietly. "I don't walk fast." "Dad." Noah was suddenly at his hip, and Lily right behind him, both of them staring past his legs at the woman on the porch like she was a deer that had wandered into the yard. "Inside, both of you." "Is she okay?" "Noah?" "She's crying, Dad?" "I'm not crying." Emma said, "That's rain." Lily, who did not have a filter and never would, said, "It's not raining on your face." Emma laughed. It came out wrecked half a sob, and she pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth like she was ashamed of the sound. "Okay," she said. Okay, it's not raining on my face. Michael turned around. Kitchen. Now, both of you. But, now. They went. Slowly. The way kids go when they intend to listen from the hallway anyway. He turned back and put his hands on the doorframe and made himself think, because thinking was the only thing that had kept this family alive for 4 years. A strange woman. 2 kids in the house. A town that talks. A caseworker who already thinks I'm barely holding it together. All the ways this goes wrong. And then, unbidden, in Sarah's voice the way it always came, Michael. It's raining. What's your name? He said. Emma Sullivan. Michael Carter. He didn't offer his hand. Neither did she. You got ID. She dug in the backpack. Everything in it came out wet. She handed him a driver's license in a Ziploc bag with a photograph, a woman and a little girl at a lake, and he handed the photograph back without looking at it more than a second, because he knew what a person looked like when you touched the only thing they had left. Emma Rose Sullivan, 28, an address on Bellamy Street. This address current. It was current until 4 o'clock this afternoon, she said. He gave her the storage room. It wasn't a room. It was 8 feet by 9 off the back of the kitchen, and it held a broken treadmill, 40 pounds of Christmas decorations Michael hadn't been able to open since 2021, and Sarah's sewing machine under a bedsheet. There was a camping mattress rolled up in the corner from when Noah went through his "I want to sleep in the yard" phase. One night, Michael said, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. Door stays open. I keep the hall light on. My kids' rooms are upstairs, and I'm the last door on the left, and I'm a light sleeper. You're telling me you'd hear me? I'm telling you I'd hear you. Good, Emma said. I'd want a man to say that. If I had kids, I'd say worse. That threw him. He hadn't expected agreement. He'd expected the flinch he'd gotten used to, people flinching from him, from the widower's flatness in his face. Bathroom's through there. There's towels in the hall closet. The blue ones, not the white ones. The white ones are. He stopped. The white ones are someone's, Emma said. Yeah. Blue ones. Got it. He made her a sandwich because he couldn't not. She said no 3 times. He put it on the counter anyway and went to check the bucket, and when he came back, the plate was empty, and she was standing at the sink washing it, and when she turned around, her face was red. You didn't have to eat it that fast, he said. I didn't eat it fast. Emma, I ate it at a normal speed. When'd you eat last? I had coffee this morning. That's not food. It had cream in it. Michael leaned back against the doorframe. You know, he said, for somebody who came here asking for nothing, you argue like you're getting paid for it. And Emma Sullivan, soaked homeless 12.5 miles on her feet, looked up and gave him a small, crooked, absolutely genuine smile and said, Well, I'm out of practice at taking things. Give me a minute. Lily got out of bed at 11:40 p.m. Michael heard it, the third stair. The one that always gave her up, and he came out into the hall in time to see his daughter standing in the kitchen doorway with her stuffed rabbit under her arm, talking to a stranger. He stopped. He didn't announce himself. He listened. He'd tell himself later that any father would. Are you a hobo? Lily asked. Lily? He started. It's okay, Emma said. And then to Lily, seriously, like it was a real question deserving a real answer. I don't think so. I think you have to ride trains to be a hobo. I just walk. Where do you live? Right now, nowhere. Everybody lives somewhere. That's a really nice thing to think, Emma said. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. Lily considered this. Then, you're fat. Michael's stomach dropped through the floor. Lily Ann Carter. It's fine, Emma said, and her voice didn't change at all. Not a wobble, not a crack, which somehow was worse. She's 7. 7-year-olds say what they see. She crouched down. It took her a second, and she used the counter, and she was eye level with his daughter. Yeah, sweetheart. I'm fat. Does it hurt? Michael watched Emma Sullivan take a breath. Sometimes, she said. Where? Not where you're thinking. Lily nodded, like that made perfect sense, which for a 7-year-old it apparently did. And then she held out the rabbit and said, "You can borrow Mr. Biscuits. He's good if you're sad, but I need him back at 7. Emma didn't take it. She put one finger very gently on the rabbit's ear. 7 o'clock, she said. I'll set an alarm. Michael waited until Lily was back in bed. Then he came down. Emma was standing exactly where he'd left her, and her hand was over her mouth, and she wasn't making any noise at all, which was how he knew. "Hey," he said. She waved him off, turned toward the window, got her breathing under control in about 6 seconds flat, a skill you don't get for free. "I'm sorry about my daughter." "Don't." Her voice was rough. "Don't apologize for her. She's the first person in 11 days who asked me a question about myself." 11 days. Michael looked at her back, at the wet hair, at the shoulders squared like she was bracing for a hit that hadn't come yet. "Sit down," he said. "I'm okay standing." "Emma, sit down." She sat. "What happened?" he said. "You don't want the story." "I got a leaking roof and a truck that won't start in the cold, and I'm $1,100 from losing this house. I got nothing but time and bad news. Tell me the story." Emma turned the empty coffee cup he'd given her around in her hands. Twice. "I worked at Dell's Diner on Route 4 for 3 years, she said. 6 days a week. I opened. I never called off. Not once, not even when I had strep. I closed on Christmas Eve so Tanya could see her grandkids." She stopped. 2 months ago, Dell sold it to a guy named Rusty who's 26 and has a business degree from the internet. And he redid the menu and put a mural on the wall, and he told me, her jaw flexed. He told me that I didn't fit the brand. Michael didn't move. "He said it like that," Emma said. "In those words, in the walk-in, with the door open, where everyone could hear." She set the cup down very carefully. "I asked him what that meant. He said, 'Emma, come on, you know what it means.' And I did. I did know. So I said the number out loud because I wanted him to have to hear it, and he said," and here her voice finally went just a hair. He said, "You're the one who said it, not me." "That's illegal. In 2 states, Emma said. "Ohio's not one of them." "That can't be right." "It's right. I looked it up on the library computer, twice, because I couldn't believe it either." She laughed, and it wasn't a laugh. "Turns out in this state a man can fire you for your body, and it's just Tuesday." "Okay," Michael said. "So you got fired in May. What happened today?" "Dale Kraus." "Who's Dale Kraus?" "My landlord. Was. I was 11 days late. I had 210 of the 600. I brought it to him in cash in an envelope, and I asked him." She stopped. Started again. "I asked him for 1 more week. I had an interview Thursday at the Kroger bakery. I had it in writing. I showed him the paper. And he took the 210, Emma said. Michael went very still. He took it, and he counted it, and he put it in his pocket, and then he said, "That's a partial. Partial's not payment." And I said, "Dale, that's everything I have." And he said, she stopped. He said what? He said, "Maybe skip a few meals, sweetheart. Wouldn't kill you." The kitchen clock ticked 11 times before Michael trusted himself to speak. And then he took my bag off the porch and threw it in the rain, Emma said, and locked the door and told me he'd count to 3. Did he count to 3? He got to 2. Michael Carter stood up, walked to the sink, put both hands on the edge of it, and stared out the window at his own dark backyard for a long, long moment. "Michael," Emma said, "it's fine." "It is not fine. I didn't say it was right. I said it's fine. There's a difference, and you learn it around year 6. She stood up too. "I'm not telling you this so you'll do something. I'm telling you because you asked, and because I'm tired, and because you gave me a sandwich. That's all this is. In 7 hours, I'm out that door, and you go back to your life, and I go back to mine. That's the plan. That's the plan. That's a hell of a plan." It's the only one I've got, Emma said, so I'm real committed to it. At 12:20, he showed her the storage room again and gave her the blue towels and a sleeping bag that smelled like a garage. It's not much. Mr. Carter, Emma said, it has a roof. Do you understand that I was going to sleep behind the Sunoco tonight? I'd already picked the spot. It's behind the ice machine because the motor runs warm. Michael didn't say anything. He couldn't. Hey. She caught his face. Don't do that. Don't look like that. I'm not your problem. Nobody said you were a problem? Everybody says I'm a problem, Emma said. They just use longer words. She unrolled the mattress. Good night, Michael. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. I'll be gone before you're up, and I'll leave the towels folded. He stood in the doorway a second longer than he meant to. Emma? Yeah. You said you got fired in May. It's October. She didn't turn around. Yeah, she said. So, where were you sleeping? For 5 months. Emma Sullivan was quiet for a while. You should go to bed, she said. You've got work. At 1:15 a.m., Michael Carter got up to check the bucket in Lily's room, and on his way back down the hall, he heard something from the back of the house. Not crying. He'd have understood crying. Dripping. He went down and stood outside the storage room, and there it was. Tick. 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 Water coming through the ceiling in the corner, running down the wall, pooling on the concrete 8 inches from a woman who had walked 12.5 miles to get out of the rain. She'd moved the mattress as far from it as the room allowed, which was about a foot. She was curled on her side, facing the wall, still in her wet jacket, because it was the warmest thing she had, and she'd taken the sleeping bag and folded half of it over the treadmill to keep the water from splashing on the sewing machine under the sheet. She'd protected Sarah's sewing machine. She didn't even know whose it was. Michael stood there in the dark for a long time. Then he went out to the garage. He turned the light on and stood in the middle of it and looked at what he had. 14 sheets of half-inch plywood left over from the Hendricks job. 2 bundles of 2x4s he'd bought for a deck that never got built because Sarah got sick that April. A roll of R13 insulation. A window, a good one double pane still in the wrap that he'd pulled out of a teardown in Springfield and kept because a man doesn't throw away a good window. He had a nail gun. He had a compressor. He had a circular saw and a chalk line and a level and 39 years of his father's tools with his father's initials burned into the handles. He had 6 hours till sunrise. Michael Carter stood there and had a conversation with himself that lasted about 90 seconds. You don't know her. She's leaving in 6 hours. You're 2 payments behind. The compressor's going to wake the whole street. Carol Dunley across the way is going to have her phone out in 10 minutes. This is insane. This is the single most insane thing you have ever considered doing. And then quiet from the part of him that had been dead for 4 years. She folded the bag over the sewing machine. He picked up the chalk line. The compressor kicked on at 1:52 a.m. At 2:10, a porch light came on across the street. At 2:14, Michael's phone lit up on the sawhorse, Carol Dunley. He let it ring. At 2:20, it lit up again. He let it ring. At 2:31, he had the platform framed and squared against the south wall of the house, right where the storage room let out, and his hands were bleeding a little from the plywood, and he did not care even slightly. At 3:05, Noah appeared in the garage doorway in his pajamas. Dad. Michael pulled his earmuffs down around his neck. Go back to bed. What are you building? Bud. Dad. Noah's voice did a thing it hadn't done in 4 years. It went young. Are you building it for her? Michael set the nail gun down. Yeah, he said. Noah stood there, 10 years old hair sticking up his mother's exact eyes. Can I help? It's 3 in the morning. I know. You've got school? I know, Noah said, and then fierce and wobbly, she fixed the drawer. Michael blinked. What? The drawer, the one that falls out, in the kitchen. She fixed it. I heard her at like midnight. She was in there with your screwdriver, and she fixed it, and then she put the screwdriver back in the right spot, and she doesn't even live here." And then Noah Carter, who had not cried at his mother's funeral, who had not cried once in 4 years, who had held it in like a fist, started crying in the doorway of the garage at 3 in the morning. Michael crossed the floor and got his arms around him. "Okay," he said. "Okay, bud, okay." "Everybody leaves," Noah said into his shirt. "Everybody just leaves? I know. She's gonna leave at 7. Michael held on to his son and looked over his shoulder at 14 sheets of plywood and a good window still in the wrap. "Get your boots," he said. They worked till 5:40. Noah handed him nails and held the level and fell asleep twice, sitting up on the cooler, and Michael let him and woke him and let him again. The room was 9 by 11. Real walls. Insulated. Drywall from the garage stack mudded rough because there wasn't time to do it right, and Michael would hate that seam for the rest of his life. The good window on the east wall so the sun would come in, a door that latched. And on the floor because it was the only thing left in the house that was soft and clean, and his to give the rug from Sarah's sewing corner rolled out wall to wall. At 5:55, he carried in the spare bed frame from the attic. At 6:10, he stood in the doorway of a room that had not existed 6 hours earlier, with a nail gun in his hand and sawdust in his beard and blood dried on 3 knuckles, and he thought, "She's going to leave at 7 anyway. And that's fine. Let her leave from somewhere with a door." At 6:48 a.m., the alarm on a cheap phone went off in a storage room. Michael heard her get up, heard her fold the sleeping bag, heard her fold the blue towels. She actually folded the towels and set them on the treadmill. Heard her stop, because the wall was gone. Where the wall had been there was a doorway, and through the doorway there was a room, and in the room the sun was coming up through a double-pane window and falling across a rug and a bed frame and a woman's whole life, splitting cleanly in half at 6:48 in the morning. Emma Sullivan stood in that doorway and did not move for 11 seconds. Then she said very quietly to nobody, "No." And Michael, standing at the end of the hall where she couldn't see him, watched a grown woman put both hands flat against a door frame and hold on to it like the floor had tilted. "No," she said again. "No, no, no. Emma." She spun around. She looked at him, at his hands, at the sawdust, at the blood, at the nail gun still hanging from his fingers because he'd forgotten to put it down. "You didn't sleep," she said. "No. You built—" Her voice broke apart completely. "Michael, you were leaving at 7, Michael said. "Figured you should leave from a room." And Emma Sullivan, 28 years old, 240 pounds, who had been thrown into the rain 16 hours earlier for the crime of being 11 days late and taking up too much space in a world that had already decided she didn't belong in it, slid down that door frame to the floor of a room that had been built for her overnight and screamed. Not words, not crying. 6 months of it, 5 landlords, 3 years of a diner, a boss with a mural, a man counting to 2. All of it at once out of her on the floor of the first room anyone had ever made for her. And upstairs, Lily Carter sat straight up in bed at 7 o'clock, exactly reached for Mr. Biscuits and found him gone. Because at 4 a.m., a man had come up the stairs, taken a stuffed rabbit off a sleeping child's bed, and set it on the pillow of a room that didn't exist yet. 7 o'clock in the morning, and Lily Carter came down the stairs shouting, "Mr. Biscuits is gone. Dad, Dad, somebody took him. He was on my pillow. He's always on my pillow. He's been on my pillow since I was 4. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs because there was a woman sitting on the floor of a room that had not been in the house yesterday, and the woman had a stuffed rabbit pressed against her chest with both arms, and she was crying so hard she couldn't get air. Lily looked at the woman, then at the rabbit, then at her father who was standing in the hallway with sawdust in his beard and blood on his knuckles. "Oh," Lily said. That was all. Just, oh. 7 years old, and she understood the whole thing in 1 second flat, faster than any adult in Ashland Creek would understand it in the next 3 months. She walked over and sat down on the floor next to Emma Sullivan without being invited close enough that their shoulders touched, and she put one small hand on the rabbit's ear. You can keep him a little longer, Lily said. It's only 7:02. Emma made a sound that Michael would hear in his sleep for the rest of his life. I'm sorry, she got out. I'm sorry, honey. I'm not. I'm okay. You're not okay, Lily said. That's fine. Noah wasn't okay for like 2 years. Lily, Michael said. What he wasn't. At 7:04, Noah came down the stairs in his boots, still wearing the pajamas he'd worked in sawdust on his knees, and he stopped and looked at Emma on the floor, and did not say anything at all. He just went to the kitchen and got a glass of water and came back and held it out to her. You should drink that, he said. You're gonna get a headache. Dad says crying dehydrates you. Emma took the glass in 2 hands, because one hand was shaking too bad. Thank you, she said. I held the level, Noah said. She looked up. For the window, he said. Dad did the nails, but I held the level. It's straight. You can check it. It's straight. We did it 3 times. And Emma Sullivan looked at the window and at the 10-year-old boy standing in front of her with his mother's exact eyes and his father's exact stubbornness, and she said, It's the straightest window I've ever seen. It's not, Noah said. But thank you. At 7:15, Michael's phone rang, and the screen said, Carol Dunley. And this time, he answered because he'd learned a long time ago that the only thing worse than Carol Dunley calling was Carol Dunley not being able to reach you. Morning, Carol. Michael Carter, do you have any idea what time it was? I do. 2 in the morning, 2 a.m. Ronnie's got dialysis at 6. He needs his sleep, and you're out there running a... Was that a nail gun? Was that a nail gun, Michael? It was a nail gun. At 2 in the morning. Yes, ma'am. There was a pause. Carol Dunley had been across the street for 19 years. She'd brought a ham when Sarah died. She'd also told half the county that Michael let his kids run wild, which was, in fairness, sometimes true. Well, she said. What were you building? Michael looked down the hall at a woman on the floor holding a stuffed rabbit. A room, he said. A what? A bedroom. Off the back. For who? You've got 3 bedrooms and 2 kids. What in the world do you need? Carol, Michael said. I've got to go. He hung up, and he knew right then, standing in his own hallway at 7:16 in the morning, that he had just started a fire he was not going to be able to put out. At 7:30, Emma stood up. She did it the way she did everything, with her hand on something for leverage, and her jaw set, and she wiped her face with the heel of her palm, and she handed the rabbit back to Lily, and she said, Okay, I need to go. Michael said, What? I said 7. It's 7:30. I'm already late. Emma, Mr. Carter, I said one night, and you gave me one night, and then you gave me... Her voice went sideways again, and she stopped it hard with her teeth. You gave me a whole lot more than one night, and I'm not going to stand here and take a mile off a man who already gave me an inch he couldn't afford. Sit down. No. Emma, do you know what happens? She said. Do you know what happens to people like me when we stay? She wasn't crying now. That was the thing. Her eyes were dry and terrible. They start out nice. Every single one of them starts out nice. And then it's 2 weeks, and I'm doing the dishes, and it's a month, and I'm doing the laundry, and it's 6 weeks. And somebody's making a joke about how much room I take up on the couch, and then it's the fight, and then it's the door. It's always the door, Michael. It's just a question of how long till the door. Nobody said anything. Then Lily said, We don't have a couch. We have a love seat, and Noah broke it. Lily. He did? He jumped on it. And Emma laughed. She didn't want to. Michael watched her fight it, and Luz watched it break out of her like a cough, and she put her hand over her mouth and laughed until it turned into something else, and she had to sit down on the edge of a bed frame in a room that was 6 hours old. That's not fair, she said. That's not fair, you can't do that to me. Stay a week, Michael said. No. Stay till Thursday. Her head came up. You said you had an interview Thursday, he said. Kroger Bakery. You said you had it in writing. Emma's mouth opened, closed. You remembered that. I remember everything, Michael said. It's my whole problem. He crossed his arms. You can't walk into a job interview from behind the Sunoco. You just can't. You know it and I know it. So stay till Thursday, take the interview, and then you can go be right about me in a room somewhere else. That's manipulative. Yeah. That is deeply manipulative, Mr. Carter. I've got 2 kids, Michael said. Manipulation is my second language. At 7:52, Emma Sullivan agreed to stay until Thursday. At 7:53, she asked where the vacuum was. At 7:54, Michael said absolutely not, and at 8:20, he left for work and the vacuum was already running. Here is what happened over the next 3 days, and it happened fast, the way real things do. Tuesday. Emma found the drawer under the stove that hadn't opened since 2021 and got it open and found $400 in cash in a coffee can and a note in a woman's handwriting that said, Michael, emergency only. I mean it, S. She did not open the coffee can. She put it on the counter and left the room and let him find it himself. And when Michael came home from work and saw it sitting there, he had to go stand in the garage for 11 minutes. Tuesday night, Noah did his homework at the kitchen table without being asked for the first time since the 3rd grade, because Emma sat across from him doing nothing at all. Just sitting there, and when he said, I don't get it, she said, read it out loud to me. And he did, and then he got it, and he looked up at her like she'd done a card trick. How'd you do that? I didn't do anything. You did it. But I couldn't do it before. You couldn't do it quiet, Emma said. Some brains are loud. You gotta let 'em talk. Wednesday. Lily woke up at 5:40 with a fever of 102. Michael found out at 6:15 when he came down, and Emma was already in the kitchen with a thermometer and a bag of frozen peas, and Lily wrapped in a blanket on the love seat that Noah broke, and Emma had a piece of paper on the counter with times written on it, 5:41, 5:5, 5:6:10, and a temperature next to each one. It's going down, Emma said. 102.4, then 101.9, then 101.6. It's a virus. Give her fluids and let her sleep, and if it goes over 103 or she starts talking weird, that's the hospital. Michael stared at the paper. You wrote down the times. You always write down the times, Emma said. If you ever end up in an emergency room, the first thing they ask is when it started and nobody ever knows, and then they treat you like an idiot. Where'd you learn that? Emma turned to the sink. Emma, where'd you learn that? You're going to be late for work, she said. He went to work. He thought about that answer for 9 hours. Wednesday at 4:40 in the afternoon, Michael's foreman at Hollis Fabrication, a man named Pete Brannigan, who had known him since high school, called him into the office and shut the door and said, Mike, sit down. I'm not sitting down. Sit down, Mike. He sat down. They're cutting the second shift, Pete said. All of it. End of the month. Michael didn't say anything. You're not on the list, Pete said quickly. You're not on the list. But they're cutting your hours to 32, and you're losing the differential, and Mike, I'm going to be honest with you, because you'd want me to be, that's about a $900 difference a month. 900. Michael was 1,100 from losing the house. Okay, he said. That's it. Okay. What do you want me to say? Pete? Pete Brannigan looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, There's a rumor going around about you. There's always a rumor going around about me. They're saying you got a woman living in your house. Michael stood up. Mike, is that a company matter, Pete? No. God, no. I'm telling you because... Pete rubbed his face. Carol Dunley's sister works in HR. That's all I'm going to say. Carol Dunley's sister works in HR, and she's been saying your name in the break room. Michael got home at 5:52 on Wednesday, and there was a car in his driveway he didn't recognize, and a woman standing on his porch with a clipboard. Her name was Denise Whitlock, and she was from the county. Michael's blood went cold in about half a second because Denise Whitlock had been to his house exactly once before, 3 months after Sarah died, when a teacher reported that Noah had come to school 4 days running in the same shirt. "Mr. Carter? Miss Whitlock. I got a call. I bet you did. May I come in?" He let her in, because you always let them in. That was the first thing you learned. You always let them in, because the ones who don't let them in are the ones who have something to hide, and the ones who have something to hide are the ones who lose their kids. Emma was at the stove. Denise Whitlock stopped just inside the door and looked at her, and Michael watched the woman's face do the exact thing every face did, the flicker, the assessment, the filing away, and he felt something turn over in his chest that he did not have a name for. "Hi," Emma said. "I'm Emma Sullivan. I'll get out of your way." "You don't have to leave," Denise said. "I know I don't have to," Emma said, wiping her hands. "But you're going to ask him about me, and he's going to answer better if I'm not standing here." Lily's asleep on the love seat. She had a fever this morning, 102.4 at 5:41, down to 99.1 at 4 o'clock. No meds since noon. There's a log on the counter. Noah's upstairs and his homework's done, and he did it himself. I want that on the record. I didn't do it for him. She picked up her jacket. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." And she walked out the back door into a room that was 31 hours old and shut the door behind her. Denise Whitlock stood there for a second. Then she looked down at the counter at a piece of notebook paper with times and temperatures written on it in careful block capitals. Who wrote this? She did. How long has she been here? 3 days. Denise Whitlock sat down at Michael Carter's kitchen table and put her clipboard down and said, "Michael, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to understand that I am not your enemy. And I'm also going to tell you that the call I got said, and I'm quoting, 'A homeless woman is living in the house with those children.'" Carol Dunley. "I can't tell you who called." "It was Carol Dunley." Michael. "Ask your questions," Michael said. So she asked them. All of them. Where does she sleep? Is there a lock on the children's doors? Does she have a criminal record? Do you know that? Have you checked? What is her relationship to you? What is her relationship to your children? How much are you paying her? Is she paying you? Michael, has she asked you for money? "No," Michael said, over and over. "No, no, no. She asked me for one night. That's the only thing she has ever asked me for in her life." "And you built her a bedroom?" "Yes." "In one night?" "Yes." Denise Whitlock set her pen down. "Michael," she said, and her voice changed. "I have been doing this for 22 years, and I want you to hear me. That is exactly what it sounds like when a man is being taken. It's not. That's what it sounds like. I know what it sounds like. Lonely widower, 2 kids. Sad woman shows up at the door in the rain with nothing but a backpack and a story." "You want to hear the story," Michael said. "I've heard the story. I've heard it 100 times. You haven't heard this one." At 6:40 on Wednesday evening, Michael Carter told a county caseworker about a man named Rusty, who put a mural on a wall and said the words, "You don't fit the brand in a walk-in cooler," with the door open, and about a man named Dale Krause, who took $210 out of a woman's hand, counted it, put it in his pocket, and told her to skip a few meals. When he was done, Denise Whitlock was quiet. "Michael," she said, "none of that means she's safe." "I know. Kindness isn't a background check." "I know," Michael said, and his voice came up for the first time, and he hated it. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't laid awake? I'm not stupid, Denise. I'm tired. There's a difference, and everybody around here keeps getting it wrong." Denise Whitlock stood up. She put her clipboard under her arm. "I'm going to do a records check on Emma Rose Sullivan," she said. "That's not a threat, that's a courtesy, I'm telling you, because you'd find out anyway. If it comes back clean, I'll close this out, and I'll tell Carol Dunley's sister to find a new hobby. If it doesn't come back clean, it'll come back clean." "You don't know that." Michael looked at the back door. "No," he admitted. "I don't." At 7:10, Denise Whitlock stopped in the driveway, turned around and said, For what it's worth. The log on the counter. What about it? 22 years, Denise said. Nobody writes down the times. Nobody. Then she got in her car and left. Michael went out to the room he'd built and knocked on his own door. It's open, Emma said. She was sitting on the edge of the bed frame. There was still no mattress. There wouldn't be a mattress until Friday. She'd been sleeping on the camping pad on top of it and saying it was the best sleep of her life, and she was folding a dish towel that did not need folding. She's running your record, Michael said. Good. Emma. No, I mean it. Good. She should. Emma set the towel down. You've got 2 kids and a stranger in the back of your house. If she didn't run me, I'd think she was bad at her job. You're not worried. I'm not worried about the record. What are you worried about? Emma Sullivan looked at him for a long moment. I'm worried about Thursday, she said. At 9:55 Thursday morning, Emma Sullivan walked into the Kroger on Route 4 in a blouse she had washed in Michael Carter's sink and pressed with Michael Carter's iron on the floor of a room Michael Carter built, and she interviewed for a job in the bakery, and she was good at it, and she knew she was good at it, and the woman across the table smiled at her 4 separate times. At 10:22, the woman said, Emma, honestly, you're the strongest candidate I've talked to all week. At 10:24, the woman said, let me just grab my manager. I want him to meet you. At 10:31, the manager came in. His name was on a plastic tag. Emma read it before he sat down. She read it, and her whole body went cold from the scalp down. Rusty G. Store Manager, Deli and Bakery. Emma, Rusty said. Wow, small world. Emma did not move. Cheryl, thank you, I got it from here. He waited until the door shut. He sat down. He leaned back in the chair and put his hands behind his head, and he was 26 years old, and he had a business degree from the internet, and he smiled at her. So, he said, you're not still mad about the diner thing, are you? Emma said nothing. Because that wasn't personal. That was a brand decision. That's business. You get that right. You're an adult. He tipped his head. Man, though. Bakery. I mean. Come on, Emma. He laughed. You gotta see how that looks. And here is where it turned, and it turned in a way that nobody in that room saw coming. Least of all Emma Sullivan. Because she said, say it. What? Say it out loud. Emma. You said it in the walk-in with the door open and everybody heard you and nothing happened to you at all, Emma said. Her voice didn't rise. It went flat and quiet and level, and it was the most frightening thing Rusty G had heard in his short and entirely unearned career. So say it again, here, in an office, with your name on the door? Rusty's smile started to come apart at the edges. You're being kind of aggressive right now. I walked 12.5 miles last Friday, Emma said. In the rain, because of a thing you said in 4 seconds. So say it again, Rusty. I'll wait. He said, I think we're done here. Yeah, Emma said, and she stood up. We are. She got all the way to the door, and then she turned around and said the thing that changed the entire story, and she said it very calmly, which was worse. Cheryl's got a recorder on the table. Rusty's head came up. It's a Kroger thing, Emma said. Corporate rolled it out in March for training compliance. I know because I applied here in March and she told me. She's been recording the whole interview. She never turned it off. It's the little gray one by the coffee cup. She put her hand on the door. You walked in at 10:31. And she left. At 11:04 that Thursday morning, Emma Sullivan was standing at a bus stop with $4 in her pocket, shaking so hard she couldn't hold her phone, and she did not have a job, and she was not going to get one, and Thursday was the day she was supposed to leave. At 11:06, her phone buzzed. It was Michael. It said, How'd it go? Emma looked at that message for a long, long time. And then she did something she had never once done in 28 years. She typed bad. Can you come get me? And she hit send before she could stop herself. At 11:31, Michael Carter's truck pulled up to a bus stop on Route 4. He had left work. He had walked off the floor of Hollis Fabrication in the middle of a shift with 32 hours a week and a $900 hole in his month, and Pete Brannigan had watched him go and had not said one word. Emma got in. She shut the door. She didn't look at him. "It was him," she said. "What?" "Rusty, the diner. He's the bakery manager. He came in at 10:31, and he sat down and he said—" She stopped. Michael's hands went white on the wheel. "He said what?" "It doesn't matter." "Emma, he said what?" "He said, 'Come on, Emma Bakery. You gotta see how that looks.'" The truck sat at that bus stop with the engine running for 11 seconds. Then Michael Carter said very quietly, "Where's the store?" "No." "Where's the store, Emma?" "Michael." She grabbed his arm, actually grabbed it. "Look at me. Look at me. If you go in there, you're a man who went into a store and got in a fight over a woman he's known for 6 days. That's the story. That's the only story anybody will ever tell. Not what he said, not the diner, not the walk-in, just you. And Denise Whitlock is running my record right now, and Carol Dunley is on the phone right now, and you have 2 children." Michael's jaw was shaking. "You have 2 children," Emma said again. He put the truck in park. He put both hands over his face, and Emma Sullivan sat in the passenger seat of a stranger's truck and watched a 35-year-old man come apart in a Kroger parking lot, and she did the only thing she could think of, which was put one hand on his back and leave it there and not say a single word. They sat like that for 4 minutes. Then Michael said into his hands, "I lost $900 a month yesterday." Emma's hand stopped. "What?" "They cut the shift. 32 hours. No differential." He dropped his hands. His eyes were red. "I'm 1,100 from losing the house, and now I'm 2,000 from losing the house, and I built a room, Emma. I spent 6 hours and $400 of material building a room for a woman who was leaving at 7 in the morning, and I'd do it again. And that is the exact thing everybody in this town is about to tell me is proof I've lost my mind." Emma sat very still. "You didn't tell me," she said. "You had an interview." "Michael." "You had an interview," he said. "And you'd have gone out that door if you knew, and don't tell me you wouldn't because you were already halfway out at 7:30 on Sunday." Emma Sullivan looked out the windshield of that truck for a long time. Then she said, "Take me home." Michael's head came up. She didn't correct it. She heard it come out of her mouth, and she did not correct it, and Michael Carter heard it too, and neither one of them said a word about it, and he put the truck in drive. At 12:40 that afternoon, Emma stood in the middle of Michael's kitchen and said, "How much do you have?" "What? Total. Everything. How much?" "Emma, because I know about the coffee can," she said. $400, Sarah's handwriting. It's still sitting on that counter where I left it 4 days ago, and you haven't touched it, and you're not going to, and I need you to tell me the actual number." Michael's face did something terrible. $612, he said. "And the 400, which I'm not touching." "Okay." "Mortgage is $1,900 a month." "Okay." "Emma, what are you doing?" Emma Sullivan opened a cabinet, then another one, then the fridge. She stood there looking into a refrigerator with a gallon of milk and half a pack of hot dogs and 11 eggs, and Michael watched her shoulders go square, the exact way they'd gone square on his porch in the rain. "You've got flour," she said. "What?" 20 pounds of flour. It's in the pantry behind the crock pot. It expired in April. It's fine flour doesn't really expire. And you've got sugar, and you've got salt, and there's 4 sticks of butter in that door, and I need $11. "For what?" "Yeast," Emma said. "And a phone charger." "Emma." She turned around. "Rusty said I don't fit the brand," she said. "So I'm gonna go get real quiet for about 6 weeks, and then I'm gonna make him say my name." $11 bought 2 packets of yeast, a bag of the cheap store brand yeast in a brick, and a phone charger from the gas station rack that cost $4.99 and worked for exactly 9 days before it died. At 5:15 the next morning, Michael Carter woke up to a smell he had not smelled in his own house in 4 years. He came down the stairs and stopped in the kitchen doorway, and Emma Sullivan was standing at the counter with her hair tied up and flour to her elbows, and 11 rolls on a cookie sheet. And there were 4 more sheets going, and the whole house smelled like the inside of somebody's grandmother. "Don't," Emma said without turning around. "I didn't say anything." "You were going to say I didn't have to." "I was going to say, what is that?" "Cinnamon rolls." She scraped the counter with the edge of her hand. "You had cinnamon. It's older than Lily, but cinnamon doesn't go bad, it just gets sad." "Emma, it's 5 in the morning." "Dough doesn't care what time it is," Emma said. "Dough is the only thing in my entire life that has ever done exactly what I told it to." At 5:40, Noah came down because he smelled it in his sleep. At 5:52, Lily came down. At 6:04, all 4 of them were standing around a cookie sheet in a kitchen with the lights still off outside, eating cinnamon rolls off a paper towel, and nobody was talking. And Michael Carter had to turn around and face the window for a second because his son was licking icing off his thumb and laughing. "How many can you make?" Michael said. "With what's in this house, 40, maybe 44. And then what?" Emma looked at the clock. "And then I walk," she said. "Walk where? Everywhere." At 7:10 that morning, Emma Sullivan put 40 rolls in 2 of Sarah Carter's old Tupperware containers, and she walked out the front door of a house on Ridgeline Road, and she did not come back until 6:40 that night. She'd gone to the Sunoco first because she knew the man who worked nights, because she'd been going to sleep behind his ice machine, and he'd never once run her off. His name was Amir. She gave him 4 rolls free and asked if she could leave a container on the counter with a piece of notebook paper that said, $2 honor system, thank you. Amir looked at the paper, then at her. "People will steal these," he said. "Some people will steal these." "Emma, all people will steal these." "Then I'll know," Emma said. She came back at 4 in the afternoon and the container was empty, and there was $19 in it, which meant somebody had taken one and left 5, and somebody else had taken 2 and left nothing. And Emma Sullivan stood in a gas station holding $19 and had to go stand behind the ice machine for a minute in the daylight in the exact spot where she'd planned to sleep 6 days earlier. At 6:40, she walked back in Michael's door and put $61 on the kitchen table. Michael looked at it. "That's rent," Emma said. "No. Michael, that's not rent. You want to know why. Because rent means you're a tenant, and if you're a tenant, then I'm a landlord, and I've met the landlords in this county." He pushed it back across the table. "Buy flour." Emma's mouth opened. "Buy flour," Michael said again. "And if you ever hand me money again, I'm going to get real ugly about it, and I don't have the energy, so please don't make me." At 8:20 that night, Denise Whitlock called. Michael saw the name on the screen, and his whole body went to concrete. He walked out onto the porch and shut the door behind him, and Emma watched him through the window and did not move from the sink, and she stood there with a plate in her hand for a full 4 minutes without washing it. Michael came back in at 8:29. "Well," Emma said, "sit down." "I'm fine standing." "Emma, sit down." And Emma Sullivan sat down at that kitchen table with her hands in her lap, like a woman waiting on a verdict, because that is exactly what she was, and she'd been waiting on one version or another of it for 6 years. "It came back clean," Michael said. Emma exhaled. "Emma." She looked up. "It came back clean," Michael said. "Except for one thing, and Denise said she'd get fired for telling me, and she told me anyway. And I need you to know that she told me because she cried on the phone, and Denise Whitlock has been doing this 22 years. The kitchen went so quiet, Michael could hear the fridge. "Don't," Emma said. "Emma, don't." Her voice was not her voice. "Don't you say her name in this house." "Emma, you don't get to say her name." And then Emma Sullivan put both hands flat on Michael Carter's kitchen table, and Michael watched 28 years of a person collapse in on itself in real time and out in the hallway unseen by either of them. Noah Carter stood on the 3rd stair, the one that always gave Lily up, and did not make a sound. "Katie," Michael said. Emma made a noise. "Katie Rose Sullivan," Michael said, because he'd started, and now he had to finish, and his own voice was in pieces. 6 years old. October 9th, 2020. Bacterial meningitis. Stop. Emma. She was fine on Tuesday, Emma said. Michael stopped. She was fine on Tuesday. Emma said again to the table to nobody. She had a headache Wednesday, and I gave her Tylenol, and I took her to the walk-in clinic Wednesday night, and a man looked at her for 4 minutes and said it was a virus, and go home. And I said, she's got a stiff neck. And he said, kids get stiff necks. And I said, her light hurts. And he said, turn the lights off. She was rocking slightly the way people do. And I said, I want to write down her temperature. And he laughed at me, Michael. He laughed. He said, ma'am, you're not a nurse. Michael couldn't breathe. Thursday morning she couldn't stand up, Emma said. And I carried her. I carried her out to the car, and she was 61 pounds. And I carried her, and I got her to Dayton Children's at 6:14 in the morning. And they asked me when it started, and I didn't know. I didn't know. I said Wednesday, I think maybe Tuesday night. And I watched the woman write down, onset unclear, and I have thought about those 2 words every single day for 6 years. Emma, that's not. They said it wouldn't have changed anything, Emma said. Everybody says that. Everybody says that so fast, Michael, they say it before you finish asking. And maybe it's true, and I will never know. And that is the thing. Not that she's gone, that I don't get to know. Michael Carter got up out of his chair and crossed his own kitchen and knelt down on the floor next to a chair and did not touch her because you don't. Because he'd learned that on the worst day of his own life when 11 people touched him and he'd wanted to scream. That's why you write down the times, he said. Emma nodded. Once. Hard. Every kid, she said. Every single kid I've ever been near. 6 years. Anybody's kid gets a fever, I write it down. Waitress at a diner. Kid at a table starts running hot. I'm writing it on an order pad. She wiped her face with the flat of her hand. It's the stupidest thing. It doesn't help anybody. It's just the only thing I've got left that I can do. It's not stupid. It's completely stupid. Denise Whitlock has been doing that job 22 years, Michael said, and she stood in my driveway last Wednesday and told me nobody writes down the times. Nobody. In 22 years. Emma looked at him. And she cried on the phone tonight, Michael said, when she told me why you do. Emma Sullivan put her face in her hands. At 8:51, Noah Carter came down off the 3rd stair and walked into the kitchen and stood there. And Emma got herself together in about 2 seconds flat, the way she always could, and said, "Hey, bud, you need something?" Noah didn't answer. He walked over and put his arms around her neck from behind and hung on, and he was 10 years old, and he had not hugged another adult besides his father since a funeral 4 years ago, and he said into her shoulder, "Mom died in a hospital, and nobody wrote anything down either." Michael made a sound and had to leave the room. Here is what happened over the next 6 weeks, and it happened faster than anybody in Ashland Creek could keep track of. Week 1. Emma made $211 and put every cent of it back into flour and butter and a used stand mixer off Facebook Marketplace for $40 that had a bad bearing, which Michael fixed in the garage on a Sunday with a part he cannibalized off Sarah's sewing machine. And neither of them talked about that, and both of them thought about it every day after. Week 2. Emma made $480. She was doing rolls, and then she was doing bread, and then a woman at the Sunoco asked if she did pies, and Emma said yes before she'd finished the sentence, and then went home and taught herself to do pies off a library book in 9 hours, while Lily sat on the counter and helped, which meant she ate the scraps. Week 3. Michael took the door off the garage and put in a used commercial sink he pulled out of a restaurant teardown in Springfield, because a man does not throw away a good sink either. And Noah painted a piece of plywood with a paint pen and leaned it against the mailbox, and it said, "Emma's," in letters that got smaller at the end, because he ran out of room. Week 4, Carol Dunley came across the street. She stood in the driveway for a good 90 seconds first. 19 years across from that house, and she had never once walked up it uninvited, and she was standing there in her coat with her arms crossed, and Emma saw her from the garage, and Emma's stomach turned all the way over. "Ms. Dunley," Emma said. "You know my name." "Everybody knows your name." Carol Dunley's chin came up about an inch. "My husband's on dialysis," she said. 3 days a week. He's got no appetite. He hasn't finished a meal since March, and last Thursday my sister brought over one of your, whatever it is, the bread with the cheese in it." Emma didn't move. "He ate the whole thing," Carol said. Nobody said anything. "He ate the whole thing," Carol Dunley said again, and her voice did something, and she stopped and looked at the sky for a second. "And then he asked if there was more, and I have not heard that man ask if there was more in 9 months. "Ma'am?" "I called the county on you," Carol said. "I know. I called them at 7:20 in the morning on the 2nd of the month, and I told a woman that a homeless person was living with those children." Carol Dunley's hands were shaking. "And I want you to know that I've thought about it every day since, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend I did it out of concern, because I didn't. I did it because I was up at 2 in the morning listening to a nail gun, and I wanted somebody to be in trouble for it." Emma Sullivan stood in a garage with flour on her hands. "Do you want to come in?" she said. Carol Dunley started crying right there in the driveway. Week 5, the Pies were doing $400 a week on their own, and Emma had a spiral notebook with every order in it in block capital. $2,340, she said. 6 weeks. That's not profit. That's gross profits, about $1,400 after material. She flipped a page. "And here's what I need you to look at." Michael looked. It was a list of names, 31 of them. "That's repeat," Emma said. 31 people who ordered twice or more. "That's not luck, Michael. Luck doesn't come back." Michael Carter sat at his own kitchen table and looked at a list of 31 names in a woman's handwriting, and did not say a word for a long time. "The mortgage is due on the 1st, he said finally. "I know." "It's $1,900, and I'm short $640. "I know," Emma said. "I did the math 4 days ago. That's why I'm showing you this." "Emma, I'm not taking. I'm not offering," Emma said. "That's the thing. I'm not offering. I'm asking." She sat down across from him. "I want to rent the garage." Michael's head came up. $600 a month, Emma said, "which is exactly what I was paying Dale Krause for a 1-bedroom with black mold in the closet, and I'm getting 140 square feet with a commercial sink and a landlord who doesn't count to 3. That's the best deal I've ever been offered in my life, and you're going to sit there and be proud at me about it." "That's not. It's a business expense," Emma said. "It's a deduction. I've got a notebook, Michael. I've got 31 repeat customers. I'm about 6 weeks from having to explain myself to the IRS, and I would like to have a lease when that happens." Michael opened his mouth, closed it. "600, he said. 600. That still leaves me 40 short. $40. Emma said, "I will find in your couch." "We don't have a couch. We have a love seat," Emma said, "and Noah broke it, and there is at least $40 in it. There was $11 in it." Michael made the mortgage on the 29th by selling his father's table saw to a man in Xenia for $600 cash. And he did not tell Emma, and Emma found out on the 3rd of December when she went out to the garage to ask if he could rip a shelf, and there was a rectangle of clean concrete where a table saw had been for 39 years. She stood there for a while. Then she went in the house and did not say one word about it. And that night she made a pot roast, and Michael came in and sat down and said, "What's the occasion?" And Emma said, "Tuesday." And Michael Carter ate the best meal of his life, across from a woman who was lying to him with her whole heart, and neither of them said anything. And Noah looked from one to the other, and understood everything, and said nothing, because he was 10, and he had gotten very good at reading a room in the last 4 years. On the 6th of December at 2:15 in the afternoon, a car pulled up in front of the house that Emma recognized before it stopped. She was in the garage with her hands in a bowl. The car door shut, and a man's voice said loud from the end of the driveway, "Well, look at this." Emma Sullivan did not turn around. "Emma Sullivan," Dale Krause said. "In the flesh. And there's a lot of it." Lily was in the garage. That was the thing. That was the entire thing. Lily was sitting on an overturned bucket with a pie crust scrap in her hand, and she was 7, and she looked up. "Who's that?" Lily said. "Nobody, sweetheart. Go inside." "But, Lily." Emma's voice came out in a register that child had never heard from her. "Inside. Now. Get your brother." Lily went. Emma wiped her hands on a towel, and she turned around, and Dale Krause was standing at the end of the driveway with a phone in his hand, and the phone was up, and it was recording. "You're on my property," Emma said. "It's not your property. You're on this property." "See, that's interesting," Dale said. And he was talking to the phone now, not to her that flat-carrying voice men use when they've got an audience they can't see. "Because I heard a real interesting thing at the Legion. I heard Mike Carter's got a woman living in his house. And I said, no, that can't be right because I know that woman. She used to rent from me, and she couldn't pay $600 a month to save her life." "Get off the driveway, Dale." "So, how's she living here?" Dale said to the phone. "How does a woman go from getting evicted for non-payment on a Friday to living in a house with a widower and his 2 kids? By Monday. Anybody want to do that math with me?" At 2:17, the front door opened. It wasn't Michael. Michael was at work. Michael was on the floor at Hollis Fabrication with 32 hours a week and would not be home until 5:52. It was Noah, 10 years old in socks on the porch, and he said, "You need to leave. Go inside, kid. This is my house." "Noah," Emma said. "Noah, go in the house, please." "It's my house," Noah said, and his voice cracked right down the middle of it, and Dale Krause turned the phone toward a 10-year-old boy in his socks on his own porch. And Emma Sullivan moved. She got between the phone and the boy so fast she knocked over the bucket, and she stood there in the driveway, 240 pounds of her filling the entire frame, which is exactly what she meant to do. "Don't point that at him," she said. "It's a public street. Point it at me." "Oh, don't worry. Point it at me," Emma said. And it came out of her from somewhere 6 years deep, and Dale Krause actually took a step back, and the video would later show that, and 11,000 people would watch him do it. "Say it," Emma said. "What?" "You've got it recording, so say it. Say what you said on the porch on the 2nd of October, at 4 in the afternoon, when you took $210 out of my hand and put it in your pocket." Dale's face did something. "You counted it," Emma said. "You counted it twice, and I said, Dale, that's everything I have. I've got an interview Thursday. I've got it in writing. I showed you the paper, and you said, I don't. You said maybe skip a few meals, sweetheart. Wouldn't kill you." The whole street was quiet. Across the road, Carol Dunley was standing on her porch. She had been standing there for 90 seconds. Nobody had noticed her. "That's a lie," Dale said. "Is it? That's slander. You can't just say that on a—" "Turn it off then," Emma said. Dale Krause did not turn it off. Because here is the thing about a man like Dale Krause. He had come there with a phone in his hand, and a story in his head, and in his story, he was the one asking the questions. And it had not once occurred to him in 58 years on this earth that a fat woman in a driveway with flour on her hands might not be afraid of him. "Turn it off," Emma said again. "You won't. You know why. Because you want the video. You came here for the video. You've already got the caption written." She took one step forward. "So let's give him a good one, Dale. Ask me how much rent I pay." "What? Ask me." "You don't pay. $600 a month," Emma said. "For the garage. There's a lease. It's signed. It's dated the 11th of November, and Denise Whitlock at the county has a copy. And you know what else she's got? She's got the log. I keep on that counter every time one of those kids runs a fever with the times written down. And she's got a report that says, this house is fine, this house is fine, and I have not taken $1 out of that man's pocket that I did not put back with a receipt." "Then where'd you get $600? Dale said, and he was sneering now. And this was the moment, and every single person watching that video later would know it was the moment. "I baked it," Emma Sullivan said. At 2:24 on the 6th of December. Carol Dunley walked down her own driveway, across Ridgeline Road, and stood next to Emma Sullivan with her arms crossed, and she was 64 years old, and she had called the county on this woman 9 weeks before. "Dale Krause," Carol said, "does your mother know you're out here?" Carol: "Because I've known your mother since 1974. Carol Dunley said, "And I'm going to call her at 4 o'clock. And then Mrs. Yoon from the corner came out. And then Amir, who was not even from that street, who had come by to drop off a container, stood at the end of the driveway with his keys in his hand. And then Pete Brannigan's wife. And then a man nobody could name from 2 houses down, who had ordered a pie twice. 11 people." Dale Krause stood in the road with his phone up, filming 11 people who had come out of their houses, and he stopped because he had finally figured out what the video was going to be. He got in his car. And at 2:31, as he pulled away, he leaned out the window and said the last thing he would ever say to Emma Sullivan in person, and it was the single stupidest thing he had ever done. And there were 11 witnesses. "Enjoy it while it lasts, honey. Nobody keeps a woman like you." At 5:52 that evening, Michael Carter came home from work and found his son sitting on the porch in the cold in a coat waiting for the truck. "Noah. Dad." Michael stopped with the door half open. "There was a man here," Noah said. At 8:40 that night, after the kids were down, Michael Carter stood in his kitchen and listened to the whole thing from Carol Dunley on the phone, all of it, and he did not say one word. And when she was done, he said thank you and hung up. And then he stood there. Emma was in the doorway. "Say it," she said. "I'm going over there." "Michael." "I'm going over there right now." "Michael, look at me." She crossed the kitchen. He pointed a phone at Noah. "I know what he did." It came out of him like a gunshot, and it was the first time in 9 weeks that Michael Carter had raised his voice in that house, and he heard it, and it stopped him cold, and his hands were shaking. "I know what he did," he said again, quieter. "He pointed it at my son, and I was at work, and I was standing at a machine making $17 an hour while a 58-year-old man pointed a camera at my 10-year-old on my own porch, and you want me to sit here?" "Yes," Emma said. "Why?" "Because he wants you to come," Emma said. "That's the whole plan, Michael. That's the entire plan. He puts up the video, he waits, and the second you show up at his door, he's not a landlord who evicted a woman for being fat. He's a man who got threatened. And then it's not about him anymore. It's about you, and Denise Whitlock has to open the file back up, and this time she can't close it because now there's a police report." Michael stood in his kitchen with his fists open and closed. "So what?" he said. "So we do nothing?" "No," Emma said. She picked up her phone off the counter. "There's a woman named Cheryl Doan," Emma said, "who runs the bakery counter at the Kroger on Route 4. Michael went very still. "She's been texting me for 6 weeks, Emma said, "and I haven't answered a single one because I was scared, and because I told myself I was busy, and because there's a part of me that would rather bake bread in a garage for the rest of my life than ever walk into a room with that man in it again." She turned the phone around. "She texted me again on Tuesday, and this time she didn't ask me to call her." Michael read it, then he read it again. "Emma," he said. "Yeah. What's the date on that recording?" Emma Sullivan looked at him. "October 9th, she said. Michael's face changed. "That's Katie's day," Emma said. "That's the date. He said it to me on the 6th anniversary of the worst morning of my life, and he doesn't know, and Cheryl doesn't know, and nobody knows. And I have been sitting in your garage for 6 weeks with that in my chest like a piece of glass." The kitchen clock went 11 ticks. "Call her," Michael said. "Michael, Emma, call her." And Emma Sullivan stood in a kitchen at 9:04 on the 6th of December, with her thumb over a name on a screen, and behind her on the 3rd stair, Noah Carter sat in the dark and listened to a woman take the biggest breath of her entire life. She hit the button. It rang twice, and a voice said, "Emma. Oh my God. Emma, Where have you been? Corporate's been asking about you for a month. I've been baking, Emma said. There was a pause on the line about 4 seconds long. You've been what? Baking. In a garage. On Ridgeline Road. Emma? Cheryl Doan's voice went somewhere strange. Emma, do you have any idea what's been happening since October 9th? No. You don't. Cheryl, I don't have internet. I have a phone with 3 gigs on it and a charger from a gas station that died in 9 days. So no, I don't know anything. And Cheryl Doan said very slowly, Honey, you're going to want to sit down. Emma sat down on the floor of Michael Carter's kitchen, with her back against the cabinet, because there wasn't time to get to a chair. The recorder was on, Cheryl said. I never turned it off. I told you that when you walked out and you didn't hear me, you were already gone. Emma, I sat in that office for 10 minutes after you left, and I listened to it back, and then I did something I've never done in 19 years with this company. What did you do? I sent it to compliance, Cheryl said, over his head, on a Thursday, and then I went out to my car and threw up. Michael Carter was standing 4 feet away, and he had not moved a muscle. Emma, Cheryl said, they suspended him on the 14th. Emma's whole body went numb from the neck down. He's been out since the 14th of October, Cheryl said. Paid at first because that's how it works, and then not paid. And there's been a woman from legal calling me twice a week for a month, and every single time she says the same thing, which is, have you located Ms. Sullivan? Emma, they have been looking for you. There's a woman in Cincinnati who has your name in a file, and she cannot find you because you don't have an address. Emma made a sound. Say that again, she said. They can't find you because you don't have an... No, the other part. Cheryl Doan was quiet for a second. Then she understood. They suspended him, she said. Emma, somebody believed you. At 9:14 on the 6th of December, Emma Sullivan sat on a kitchen floor and cried in a way that had no sound in it at all, and Michael Carter got down on the linoleum next to her and did not touch her, and Noah Carter sat on the 3rd stair in the dark and pressed both hands over his mouth so they wouldn't hear him. Emma, Cheryl said, you still there? I'm here. There's more. Cheryl, there's more, and I have to say it fast because I've been sitting on it for 6 weeks. Cheryl took a breath. You're not the only one. Emma stopped breathing. There's 4 of us, Cheryl said. 4. That's what I know about. 2 from the diner, and 1 from the store, and me. You. Me? Cheryl said. March of last year. He told me I read older than the brand. I was 51. I had 9 months to my pension, and I sat there and I said thank you for the feedback. Rusty and I went and I stocked yogurt for 6 hours. Her voice went hard. And then, in October, a big girl with flour under her nails walked into my office and was the best interview I've had in 19 years, and I watched him do it to her face, and I thought, no, not twice, not in front of me. At 9:22, Emma Sullivan said, what do they want from me? A statement. That's it. Emma, that's not it, that's everything. Right now, they've got a recording of a man being ugly to a candidate who then vanished off the face of the earth. You know what a lawyer does with that. A lawyer says, well, she never followed up. So how bad could it have been? You're the whole thing. You've always been the whole thing. You just weren't in the room. Michael said quiet. Ask her about the diner. What? Ask her about the diner. 2 from the diner. Ask her who. Emma asked. Cheryl said 2 names, and Emma Sullivan put her head back against the cabinet and closed her eyes, because one of them was Tanya, who had grandkids whose Christmas Eve shift Emma had covered for 3 years running. At 9:40, Emma hung up. She sat on that floor. Say something, Michael said. I'm scared. Okay, that's not Michael, you don't get it. She turned her head. For 6 years, the story of my life has been that I'm the problem. Every landlord, every manager, every guy at a gas station with a comment. And the thing about that story is it's finished. It doesn't ask anything of me. I just carry it. And now there's a woman in Cincinnati with a file, and if I open my mouth and it doesn't work, it won't be finished. It'll be worse, Emma said. It'll be proved. It'll be a lawyer in a room saying, "No, ma'am, we looked into it, nothing happened. You're just fat and unlucky, and I will have to live the rest of my life knowing somebody checked." Michael Carter sat on his own kitchen floor. "Sarah had a lump in February," he said. Emma's head came up. "February, and she didn't go till June." He was looking at the cabinet across from him. "You want to know why?" "Because if she didn't go, she didn't have it. That's it. That's the whole reason. She was a 41-year-old woman with a master's degree, and she sat in this kitchen and told me out loud, 'If I don't go, I don't have it.'" Emma didn't move. "She went in June," Michael said. "Stage 3, and every doctor said it wouldn't have changed anything." He turned his head and looked at her. "Everybody says that, Emma. They say it before you finish asking." The kitchen clock went 11 ticks. "That's not fair," Emma said. "No. You can't use my own words on me." "I've got 2 kids," Michael said. "It's my second language." Emma Sullivan laughed with her whole face wet, and at 9:51 on the 6th of December she said, "Okay. Okay. Call her back in this morning," Emma said. "I'll give the statement. I'll give the whole thing." She wiped her face. "But I need one thing first, and you're gonna hate it." "What?" "I need to go see Tanya." At 11:15 the next morning, Emma Sullivan knocked on the door of a duplex on Mercer Street, and a 62-year-old woman opened it and stood there with a dish towel in her hand and said nothing for a solid 5 seconds. Then Tanya Boyd said, "You're alive." "I'm alive. You didn't call me?" "Tanya." "3 years," Tanya said. "3 years I worked next to you. 3 years and you got fired in May, and you didn't call me, and I called that phone 30 times, and it went dead in July, and I thought," her voice went, "I thought you were dead." "Emma, I sat in my kitchen in August and told my daughter I thought you were dead." Emma Sullivan stood on a porch and had nothing. "I couldn't," she said. "Why?" "Because you'd have let me stay." Tanya Boyd's face broke. "Of course I'd have let you stay," she said. "That's the point, you idiot. That's the whole point of a person. You've got 2 grandkids in a 2-bedroom. Emma. You've got 2 grandkids in a 2-bedroom, Emma said. And I take up a lot of room. Tanya. I take up a lot of room and I know exactly how much. And there is not one day of my life I don't know it. And Tanya Boyd came out onto that porch in her socks and grabbed a 240-pound woman by both shoulders and shook her, actually shook her and said, "Don't you ever say that in front of me again." At 11:40, they were at Tanya's kitchen table. At 11:52, Tanya said, "He did it to me too." Emma's cup stopped halfway up. "July," Tanya said. 2 months after you. I was doing 61, and he told me the brand was going younger and faster, and he cut me to 11 hours a week, which is not firing Emma. That's the trick. That's the whole trick. They don't fire you. They starve you out so you quit, and then you can't claim anything. Her jaw was set. I quit in August. I've been cleaning offices at night since August. I'm 62 years old and I clean a dentist's office at 10 at night. Tanya. Don't. Tanya, there's a woman in Cincinnati. I know, Tanya said. Emma stopped. Cheryl called me in October, Tanya said. First week. She found me on Facebook. And I said no. The kitchen was quiet. Why? Emma said. Tanya Boyd looked at her hands. Because I'm 62, she said. And I clean offices. And if I put my name on a piece of paper against a corporation and it goes wrong, I don't get another one. You understand? At 28 you get another one. At 62 there is no another one. She looked up. And because I was ashamed. Of what? Of you, Tanya said. Emma's whole body went cold. I watched him do it, Tanya said. In the walk-in, door open. I was 4 feet away with a bus tub in my hands, and I heard every word, and I put the tub down, and I walked into the dining room, and I wiped table 6. Her face was terrible. Table 6 was already clean, Emma. I wiped a clean table for 4 minutes so I wouldn't have to be in that room. And then you came out and you smiled at me and you said, "Hey, hun, you want me to grab your side work?" And I said yes. She was crying now openly the way people do at 62 without any performance in it at all. You covered my side work on the day he fired you for being fat, and I let you, because I needed the job. Emma Sullivan sat there. "So no," Tanya said. "I didn't call Cheryl back. Because how do you put your name on a paper about a woman you wiped a clean table to get away from?" At 12:20 in the afternoon, Emma Sullivan reached across a kitchen table and took an old woman's hand. "Tanya," she said, "look at me." "I can't." "Look at me." And she waited. And Tanya did. "I've been sleeping behind an ice machine for 5 months, so I don't have a lot of high ground, and I'm not going to pretend I do. But I need you to hear this, and then I'm never going to say it again." Emma's voice was steady. "I'm not mad you wiped the table. Emma, I'm mad you're cleaning a dentist's office at 10 o'clock at night at 62 years old," Emma said. "And I'm mad that man is sitting at home suspended with pay while you do it. And I am mad that both of us spent 6 months believing we deserved it, because that's how good he is at it." Tanya Boyd looked at her for a long moment. "Suspended," she said. Emma nodded. "Since when?" "October 14th. And Tanya Boyd put both hands over her mouth. At 12:41 she said, "Give me the number." At 2:10 that afternoon, Emma Sullivan came out of a duplex on Mercer Street and got into a truck and shut the door and said, "3. 3 what?" "3 of us are signing. Cheryl, Tanya, me. The 4th one won't. She's got a kid and a green card issue, and I'm not touching that, and I told Cheryl to leave her alone." Michael said, "You okay?" Emma looked out the windshield. "She wiped a clean table," she said. "What?" "Nothing," Emma said. Drive. Over the next 11 days, it got very fast. On the 9th, a woman named Priya Raman from an employment law firm in Cincinnati called Emma Sullivan and talked to her for 2 hours and 40 minutes. And at the end of it, she said, "Ms. Sullivan, I'm going to be honest with you, because everyone else in your life has apparently decided not to be. Ohio has no statute protecting weight. That's true. That's what he was counting on." "I know. But he said it to a candidate for a job, on a recording, with a witness. And then he said it to an employee in a walk-in with a witness. And then he cut a 62-year-old woman's hours after she witnessed it." Priya's voice sharpened. "Ms. Sullivan, that last part is retaliation. And that is federal." Emma sat down on a bucket in a garage. "Say that again," she said. On the 10th, Denise Whitlock called Michael and said, "I'm closing the file." "Okay, Michael, there's something you should know." "What?" "I got a second call," Denise said. 2 days ago, anonymous, male. Said there was a woman running a food business out of your garage without a license, and that you were letting her serve the public out of an unpermitted kitchen." A pause. "That one's not mine. That one goes to the health department." Michael closed his eyes. "Dale Krause," he said. "I didn't say that." "Denise, I'm going to tell you something, and then I'm going to hang up," Denise Whitlock said. "The health department is a 3-week backlog and they inspect on a Tuesday. That's all I said. I said the words 3 weeks and Tuesday, and that's the whole conversation we had." On the 11th, Emma Sullivan stopped baking, cold, in 1 day. 40 orders in the notebook, and she called every single one of them personally and said the same sentence, "I'm not able to fill this, and I'm refunding you, and I'm sorry." It took her 4 hours. She cried after the 9th call, and then she stopped crying and did the other 31. Michael came home at 5:52 to a garage with nothing in it. "Emma, it's an unpermitted kitchen," Emma said. "He's right. That's the thing, Michael, he's right. I've been selling food to the public out of a garage for 6 weeks and I knew it, and I told myself I'd deal with it later because I had a mortgage to make. So we get the license. It's $1,200 and a plan review and a 3-inch air gap on the sink and a separate hand wash basin and a certified food manager course. That's $190 in 8 hours, Emma said. I looked it up on the library computer this morning. It took me 40 minutes. I could have looked it up in October, and I didn't because I didn't want to know. Emma, he's right, she said again, and her voice finally cracked. That's the part I can't stand. He's a bad man, and he's right. And if the health department walks in here on a Tuesday, they don't care that he's bad. They just shut me down and fine you and put it in the paper, and then the story is, homeless woman runs illegal kitchen in widower's garage. And Michael, that story writes itself. That story is so easy I could write it in 9 seconds. Then we've got 3 weeks, Michael said. Emma stopped. Denise said 3 weeks. She said it on purpose. He set his lunchbox down. So we've got 3 weeks and $1,200 and 8 hours of a course. We don't have $1,200. No, Michael said. We don't. They stood there. Michael, Emma said. Where's the table saw? He didn't answer. Where's your father's table saw? Senior, Michael said. How much? 600. Emma Sullivan turned around and put her hands on the workbench and stood there with her back to him for about 10 seconds. On the 29th, she said. Yeah. For the mortgage? Yeah. It had his initials burned in the handle, Emma said. And you sold it to a man in Xenia so I could keep making pies in a garage that isn't even legal. Emma, don't. She turned around and her face was wrecked. Don't say it's fine. Don't do the thing where you say it's fine. It is fine. It's not. Emma? Michael Carter crossed the garage. It's a saw. I've been looking at it for 4 years. I've walked past that, saw every single day since the funeral, and you know what I did with it? Nothing. Not once. 4 years. It sat in this garage under a tarp collecting rust while I was too tired to build anything, and the one night I finally built something in this house, I didn't even use it. Emma stared at him. I framed that room with a circular saw and a chalk line at 2 a.m. Michael said, because I couldn't wait for the table saw to warm up. That's the truth. That's the actual truth. It sat there for 4 years, and it wasn't even there the night it mattered. At 6:40 on the 11th of December, Emma Sullivan said, We need $1,200 in 3 weeks, and I just refunded 40 orders. And Noah Carter said from the doorway, You've got 1,140. They both turned around. What? Noah was standing there with the spiral notebook. Noah, you didn't refund 40, he said. You refunded 39. You called Mrs. Yohn twice by accident. She's on page 4 and page 9, and you missed Mr. Delgado because you wrote him under D and then under his wife's name. He held up the book. And 12 people said no. Emma blinked. What? 12 people said no. They wouldn't take the refund, Noah said. I know because you put a little check next to the refunds, and there's 12 without a check. Carol said no. Amir said no. Mrs. Yoon said no both times. He was talking fast now, 10 years old, absolutely certain. That's $410. And you've got $730 in the coffee can. Michael's head snapped around. The coffee can's $400. It's $730, Noah said. Noah, it's $400. I've been putting money in it, Noah said. The garage went dead silent. Since November, Noah said. I did leaves. Mrs. Yoon and the Brannigans and the guy with the flag, and then in December I did driveways when it snowed. I get 20 a yard. His chin was doing something. And I know Mom's note says emergency only, and I know Dad, I read it 100 times. But I figured if I put money in and didn't take any out, it's not the same thing. Michael Carter stood in his garage and could not speak. Is that an emergency? Noah said. His voice went young the way it had at 3 a.m. in October. Is this one because I can't tell? Nobody tells me anything. Everybody just goes in the other room, and I sit on the stairs. At 6:52 on the 11th of December, Michael Carter got down on one knee in his garage and pulled his 10-year-old son into his chest and said, Yeah, bud, this one counts. At 7:15, Emma Sullivan opened a coffee can with a note in a dead woman's handwriting taped to the lid and counted $731. And the extra dollar was a single folded into a triangle, the way a 7-year-old folds a dollar. She looked up. Lily was in the doorway with Mr. Biscuits. "That's from the tooth," Lily said. Emma Sullivan sat down on the floor of a garage in December and put her hands over her face. On the 14th, she took the food manager course in a strip mall in Dayton for $190 and 8 hours, and she scored a 94, and the proctor said, "That's the highest I've had this year." And Emma said, "I studied," and did not say that she'd studied for 11 hours the night before with a phone flashlight because the good lamp was in the kids' room. On the 16th, Michael Carter cut a hole in his garage wall and put in a separate hand wash basin, and Pete Brannigan showed up on a Saturday with a truck and a 3-inch air gap kit and said, "Shut up, Mike," before Michael could open his mouth. On the 18th, Carol Dunley's brother-in-law, who was retired plumbing inspector for the county and had not spoken to Carol in 11 years, over a will, showed up in the driveway and walked in and looked at the sink for 40 seconds and said, "That's wrong." "What?" "That's wrong. That's a 2-inch. It's got to be a 3-inch minimum. They'll fail you on it in 4 seconds. He took his coat off. "Where's your saw?" "I don't have a saw." The man looked at him. "You built a room in one night and you don't have a saw." "I've got a circular saw." "Son," the man said, "get me the circular saw." On the 23rd at 10:40 in the morning, a health inspector named Gary Wozniak walked into the garage at 114 Ridgeline Road 3 weeks early because Dale Krause had called 4 more times and complaints stack. Emma Sullivan opened the door with a clipboard already in her hand. "Ms. Sullivan." "Yes, sir." "I'm here about a complaint that—" "Cottage food operation," Emma said. "Ohio Revised Code 3715.023. Non-hazardous baked goods, only. No cream fillings, no custard, no cheesecake. Product labeled with my name address, and a plain language statement that it's made in a home kitchen not inspected by the department. I've got the labels here. I've got the food manager cert dated the 14th. I've got a log of every batch since November 11th with the date and the customer, and I've got the receipts for every ingredient. And if you're here to shut me down, I'd like you to do it fast because I've got a thing at 1 o'clock. Gary Wozniak stood there. "Ma'am," he said, "cottage food doesn't require an inspection." "I know," Emma said. "But somebody called you 4 times, and you drove out here, and I'm not going to waste your morning." He looked at the sink. He looked at the hand wash basin. He looked at the air gap that a retired inspector had rebuilt on the 18th. "Who did your gap?" he said. "Ray Dunley." "Ray Dunley's alive." "Ray Dunley's in my driveway right now," Emma said. "He's been here every day for 5 days and I can't get him to leave." Gary Wozniak wrote for about 30 seconds. Then he tore off a sheet and handed it to her. "That's a no action," he said. "That's me saying I came. I looked, there's no violation, and if the same individual calls a 5th time, that goes in the file as a pattern." He put his pen away. "Ms. Sullivan, off the record." "Yes, sir." "The complainant gave his name on the second call," Gary said. "They always do. They think they're being brave." He was already turning to go. 58-year-old male owns 4 rentals in Dayton. That name comes across my desk about twice a year, and I want you to understand something. I have never once been called out to one of his properties by a tenant because his tenants are all too scared to call me. He stopped in the doorway. "I'd be very interested," Gary Wozniak said, "if one ever did." And at 1:04 that afternoon, in a conference room in Cincinnati, a woman named Priya Raman put a recorder on a table and said, "Ms. Sullivan, we're on the record. Would you state your name?" And Emma Sullivan, who had knocked on a door in the rain 11 weeks earlier and asked for one night, sat up straight in a chair in a blouse she'd pressed on the floor of a room a man built for her overnight, and said, "Emma Rose Sullivan. And before we start, I need to tell you about a woman named Tanya Boyd who wiped a clean table." Priya Raman looked up from her legal pad. "Ms. Sullivan, we're not here about Tanya Boyd." "I know. We're here about you." "I know that too," Emma said. But you're gonna ask me why I waited 9 weeks to call anybody, and the answer to that question has Tanya Boyd's name in it, so we can do it now, or we can do it in an hour. Priya Raman set her pen down. Go ahead, she said. It took 2 hours and 11 minutes. At 3:15, Emma Sullivan walked out of a conference room in Cincinnati and got into a truck with 191,000 miles on it, and Michael Carter had been sitting in that parking garage the entire time with the engine off in 29 degrees because he wasn't going to burn the gas. Well, he said, they asked me 40 minutes of questions about the diner, Emma said, and an hour about the interview, and then for 31 minutes, a lawyer asked me questions about Tanya's hours. That's good. Michael, they had her schedule. Emma turned in the seat. They had it printed. 61 hours in June, 60 in July, and then 11, 11, 11, 11. 4 weeks in a row. 11. Her hands were shaking. You know when the cut starts. The week after she gave a statement to the diner's HR line about what he said to me in the walk-in. Michael's head came around. She gave a statement. In May, Emma said. Tanya Boyd called the ethics line in May and told them what he said, and nobody ever called her back, and she never told me, and she has been carrying it for 7 months believing she wiped a clean table. Michael Carter put both hands on the wheel and didn't start the truck. She didn't wipe a clean table, he said. She wiped the table, Emma said, and then she went home and called the number on the poster in the break room. Both things are true. That's what nobody tells you about people. At 5:40 that afternoon, Emma Sullivan knocked on a duplex door on Mercer Street, and Tanya Boyd opened it, and Emma said, May 22nd. Tanya went white. They have it, Emma said. The ethics line report. It's got a case number and a timestamp, and it says, no action taken, insufficient corroboration. Emma's voice broke clean in half. Tanya, you called. It didn't do anything. You called. Emma, it didn't. You called and they buried it, and then he cut your hours to 11 the week after. And there's a lawyer in Cincinnati who says that's the strongest thing in the whole file, and it's not mine, it's yours. Emma Sullivan stood on a porch in December. 7 months. You let me sit at your table and tell you I wasn't mad about the table, and you didn't say one word about May 22nd. Tanya Boyd's chin came up, and it was the exact same motion Carol Dunley had made in a driveway on the 6th. Because it didn't work, she said. So what? So what's the point of telling somebody you tried if you failed? The point is, I didn't know somebody tried, Emma said. And Tanya Boyd, 62 years old, cleaner of dentists' offices at 10 at night, sat down on her own porch step in the cold and put her face in her dish towel. On the 7th of January, Rusty Gephardt was terminated for cause. Cheryl Doan called at 4:11 in the afternoon, and Emma was elbow deep in a bowl, and she put the phone on speaker with her wrist, and Cheryl said one sentence. It's done. Emma didn't say anything. Emma, it's done. Termination for cause effective this morning, and legal's talking settlement on all 3. Say the reason, Emma said. What? They fired him for a reason. Say the reason. The actual words. Cheryl Doan read it off a screen. Retaliatory reduction of hours against an employee who engaged in protected activity, she said, and conduct violating the company's respectful workplace standard. Emma Sullivan stood in a garage with dough on her hands and said, That's Tanya's. What? The first one. That's Tanya's line, not mine. And then Emma laughed, and it came out of her like something breaking loose after 6 years, and she had to lean on the workbench. Cheryl, they got him on Tanya. Emma, he fired me for being fat, and it was legal. And then he starved out a 62-year-old woman for telling the truth about it, and that's what took him down. She wiped her eyes with her forearm because her hands were covered. She thinks she did nothing. Cheryl, that woman, has spent 7 months thinking she did nothing. At 4:40, Emma Sullivan drove to Mercer Street in a truck she'd borrowed with a 9-year-old's certainty, and knocked on a door. And when Tanya opened it, Emma said, Get your coat. What? Get your coat, Tanya. Emma, what? You're quitting the dentist's office tonight, Emma said. And you're gonna do it in person, and I'm driving you, and then we're going to Ridgeline Road, and there's a 7-year-old who wants to meet you because I've been talking about you for a month. Tanya Boyd stood in her doorway. I can't quit, she said. Emma, I clean offices I don't have. $600 a month, Emma said. Plus half of everything over $3,000. It's not charity, it's the worst offer you'll ever get from anybody. And you're gonna take it because I can't do 40 pies a week by myself, and I'm not asking a stranger. You don't do 40 pies a week. I do now, Emma said. Carol Dunley put us in the church bulletin. The settlement came in March. Emma Sullivan sat in Priya Raman's office and looked at a number on a piece of paper for a long time. That's less than you think it is, Priya said. Fees come off, taxes come off. And there's a non-disparagement clause, which means you can never post about him, you can never name him publicly, and if you do, they claw it all back. So, I take money to shut up. Yes, Priya said. That's exactly what it is, and I'm not going to dress it up for you. That's the trade. It's an ugly trade, and everybody in this building knows it. And if I don't sign, then we litigate for 2 to 4 years, and you sit in a room while a defense attorney asks you your weight, your medical history, your eating habits, whether you've ever been treated for depression, and whether the death of your daughter in 2020 might have affected your job performance. Priya's voice did not change. I'd win. Probably. And you'd be 42. Emma Sullivan sat very still. They'd bring up Katie. Ms. Sullivan, Priya said. They'd start with Katie. At 6:52 that night, Emma stood in a kitchen on Ridgeline Road and said, I'm signing it. Okay, Michael said. Say something else. What do you want me to say? Tell me I'm a coward, Emma said. Go ahead. Everybody else in my life has had an opinion about me for 6 years, so have one. Michael Carter dried his hands on a towel and turned around and said, Sarah wanted to sue the walk-in clinic. Emma stopped. Not the one that missed hers, he said. There wasn't one to sue for hers. It was just bad luck, that's all it ever was. But there was a nurse practitioner in April who told her the lump was probably a duct thing, and to come back in 3 months, and after the diagnosis, Sarah wanted to burn that woman's whole life down. He folded the towel. And in October, when she was down to 91 pounds, she said to me, Michael, I've got 4 months, and I'm not spending one of them in a deposition. And she didn't. That's different. How? She was dying. You've been dying since 2020, Michael said, and you finally stopped last October, and I'm not going to watch you go back in a room for 4 years, so a man in a suit can ask you what you weigh. He hung the towel on the oven door. Take the money. Buy a building. Emma Sullivan laughed with her hand over her mouth. You're insane, she said. Take the money and buy a building, Emma. The building was on Route 4. It was 1,100 square feet, and it had been a nail salon, and then a vape shop, and then nothing for 2 years, and it was 4 blocks from a Kroger, and 1.5 miles from where Dell's Diner used to be, before Rusty Gephardt put a mural on the wall and killed it in 14 months. Emma stood in it in April with her hands in her jacket pockets. Say it, Michael said. It's got a grease trap. Emma, it's got a grease trap and a 3-compartment sink and the hood's shot, but the hood is $11,000 and I've got... She stopped. Michael, I can't do this. Why? Because if I sign a commercial lease, I have to be a person who signs commercial leases, Emma said, and it came out of her fast and ugly and true. And I don't know how to be that. I know how to sleep behind an ice machine. I'm excellent at that. I know how to be small, and I know how to say sorry first, and I know how to eat a sandwich in 9 seconds and be ashamed of it. And that's Michael. That's my whole skill set. That's all I've got. And if I sign that and it fails, then everybody who ever told me I don't belong in a room was right. And I will never be able to unknow that. Michael Carter stood in an empty nail salon on Route 4. Emma, he said. Sit down. Don't. Sit down. She sat down on an overturned bucket in an empty building. On the 2nd of October, you knocked on my door, Michael said, and you asked me for one night. And I want you to understand something, because I've been trying to figure out how to say this since about Christmas, and I keep getting it wrong. Michael, I didn't build that room for you. he said. Emma looked up. I built it because I was already gone, Michael said. That's the truth. I'd been gone 4 years. I went to work and I came home and I put food in front of my kids and I sat in that garage and I looked at a table saw. And I didn't build one thing in 4 years. Emma, not one thing, because what's the point? She's not there to show it to. His jaw was working. And then a woman folded a sleeping bag over my dead wife's sewing machine at 1 a.m. to keep the rain off it. And she didn't know whose it was. And she was never going to tell me she did it. Michael. You want to know why I built it in 6 hours? Because I could. Because for the first time in 4 years, there was a thing in front of me that I could actually fix. Michael Carter's voice went. You didn't take anything from this family. You gave me back a thing to do with my hands. Emma Sullivan sat on a bucket and cried. That's not fair, she said. You keep saying that. Because you keep doing it. At 3:15 in the afternoon on the 4th of April, Emma Rose Sullivan signed a 5-year commercial lease with her hand shaking so bad she had to do the S twice. They opened on the 9th of June. Noah painted the sign because there was never 1 second of discussion about who was painting the sign, and this time he measured first, and it said, Emma's in letters that were all the same size, and underneath in smaller letters it said, since 2 a.m., and when Michael asked him what that meant, Noah said, she'll know, and would not explain it to anybody ever for the rest of his life. Tanya Boyd ran the front. Cheryl Doan quit Kroger in July with 9 months to a pension she'd been protecting for 19 years, and came in as the manager. And when Emma said, Cheryl, your pension, Cheryl Doan said, Emma, I threw up in a parking lot for you, I'm coming. Carol Dunley's husband, Ronnie, sat at the two-top by the window 3 days a week between dialysis appointments and ate whatever Emma put in front of him and finished it every time. And Carol sat across from him and watched him do it and did not say a word about it ever, because if she'd opened her mouth, she'd have come apart. Amir came in on the 11th of June on his day off, and Emma tried to comp him and he refused and put a 20 on the counter for a $4 roll and left before she could argue. And Emma Sullivan stood at that register and remembered the exact temperature of the concrete behind an ice machine. On the 2nd of October, 1 year to the day, Michael Carter came home from work at 5:52, and there was an envelope on the kitchen table. What's this? Open it. Emma. Michael opened the envelope. He opened it. He read it. He read it again. He sat down. What is this? It's a deed, Emma said. I know what it is. Emma, what is this? It's 49% of the building on Route 4, Emma said. In your name, and it's not a gift, so put your face back. You've got a lease on a garage that I paid $600 a month on for 8 months. That's $4,800 of rent. And you did every dollar of the build-out with your own hands, and never took a cent for the labor, and Priya priced it at $19,000 and change. I bought your sweat. It's a transaction. Her arms were crossed. And I gave you the extra because you sold your father's table saw to make a mortgage payment for a woman you'd known 9 weeks, and there's no line item for that, so I put it in the percentage. Michael Carter sat at his kitchen table, holding a piece of paper. Emma, he said, I know you don't want it. Then why? Because I asked you for one night, Emma Sullivan said, and you gave me a future, and I have been trying for a year to figure out what you do about that. And it turns out there is nothing you do about that. There's no math. So I did the only thing I know how to do, which is I made it a business expense, and you're going to sit there and be proud at me about it. And Michael Carter put his head in his hands at his own kitchen table. No, he said into them. Michael, no. He looked up and his eyes were red and his voice was absolutely steady. You gave this family a home. At 6:15 that night, Lily Carter came downstairs and said, Is he crying? Yeah, Emma said. Why? Because I gave him a present. Lily considered that with the total seriousness of an 8-year-old. That's dumb, she said. It really is, Emma said. On the 14th of October, Emma Sullivan got a letter from a lawyer she'd never heard of, representing a man named Dale Krause. She read it standing up in the shop with flour on her hands, and Tanya watched her read it, and Cheryl watched Tanya watch her. What is it? Tanya said. He's suing me for defamation, Emma said. The whole shop stopped. He put up the video, Emma said. The one from the driveway, in December. He put it up in December and it did nothing, 400 views. And then somebody's daughter reposted it in August, and it did 11,000. And it turns out, when 11,000 people watch a 58-year-old man take one step backwards from a woman with flour on her hands, they don't take his side. So he's suing you. He's suing me for what I said in the driveway, Emma said. About the $210 and the meals. Cheryl Doan said, Emma, he recorded it. He recorded you saying it. That's his own video. I know. He filmed his own, I know Cheryl. At 4:40 that afternoon, Emma Sullivan called Priya Raman, and Priya laughed for 11 straight seconds. Miss Sullivan, she said, do you understand what discovery is? No. Discovery is where I get to ask him for every text, every ledger, every eviction filing, every security deposit he's ever held going back 6 years, and he has to give them to me under oath, or a judge holds him in contempt. Priya's voice had something in it Emma had never heard. He is voluntarily opening the door to his entire business, to me. Ms. Sullivan, in 11 years, nobody has ever done me a favor this large. So we win. We don't have to win, Priya said. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation, and he filmed the truth himself, and there were 11 witnesses in that road. He'll drop it inside 90 days. She was already typing. But before he does, I'm going to have 4 years of his tenant records, and there's a health inspector in your county named Wozniak, who's been waiting a long time for exactly one tenant to come forward. Emma Sullivan stood very still. How many tenants does he have? She said. 19, Priya Raman said. He dropped it in 61 days. By then it didn't matter because Priya Raman had the records, and by the following March there were 6 tenants at a county hearing, and the first one to sign her name was a woman named Rosa, who had a 2-year-old and black mold in a closet, and who told a room full of people that she'd been afraid to call for 3 years. Emma Sullivan sat in the back of that room and did not say a word. Because it wasn't her turn. She'd had her turn. On the 9th of June, 2 years after they opened, Michael Carter walked into the shop at 5:52 in the evening, and Noah was 14 and behind the counter, and he was 6'1", and he had his mother's exact eyes, and he'd worked every Saturday for 2 years, and he said, Dad, she's in the back. She's been weird all day. Weird how? Weird like she made a pie and didn't sell it. Michael went in the back. Emma Sullivan was standing at a steel table with a pie in front of her. What's the occasion? He said. Tuesday, Emma said. It's Thursday. Michael. She didn't look up. Sit down. That's my line. Sit down. He sat down on an overturned bucket in the back of a bakery, and Emma Sullivan looked at a pie for about 4 seconds, and then she said, I'd like to be buried with the deed to that garage. Michael blinked. What? That's not what I meant to say. Emma put her hands flat on the table. I had it written down. I had it written down, Michael. I wrote it on a card. I've had the card in my apron since March, and I just said the garage thing instead. Emma, what is happening? Katie would be 12, Emma said. Michael went still. She'd be 12 today, Emma said. That's not the anniversary. That's the birthday. That's the 9th of June. And every single year of my life since 2020, I have spent the 9th of June in a room by myself, and I planned it, Michael. I planned it for 6 years. I have a hole. I know how to do it. Her voice was steady, and her hands weren't. And this morning I woke up and I was thinking about the hood filter. Michael didn't move. I woke up on my daughter's birthday, Emma Sullivan said, and my first thought was the hood filter. And I sat up in that bed at 4:40 in the morning, and I thought, what is wrong with me? What kind of a mother? She stopped. She started again. And then I got up and I made this pie, because she liked cherry. She liked cherry, and she was 6 and she couldn't say cherry. She said cherry. And I have not said that out loud to a single human being in 6 years. Michael Carter said, cherry. Emma Sullivan made a sound. That's right, she said. That's it. That's exactly it. At 6:11 in the evening on the 9th of June in the back of a bakery on Route 4, Emma Sullivan said, "I don't want to sleep in the room anymore." Michael's head came up. "Say that again," he said. "You heard me." "Emma, I've slept in that room for 2 years and 8 months, and every single night I have known exactly what it is," Emma said. "It's the room a good man built for a woman who was leaving at 7 in the morning. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me, and I will never be able to explain to anybody what it is to open a door and find out somebody built you a wall." She looked at him. "But Michael, I'm not leaving at 7 anymore. And I would like to stop sleeping in the room I was supposed to leave from." Michael Carter sat on the bucket in the back of a bakery. "What are you asking me?" he said. "I'm not asking you anything," Emma said. "I've never asked you for anything but one night in my entire life, and look what happened." "Emma, so I'm telling you," Emma Sullivan said. "I'm telling you because I'm 40 pounds down, and I'm still fat, and I'm gonna be fat. That's not the thing, that was never the thing, that was just the excuse everybody used." Her chin came up. "The thing is, I take up room. I take up a lot of it. And I'm done apologizing for it. And if you want me at that table, you get all of it every day forever, and I'm not going to be small in your house." The kitchen went quiet. "Emma," Michael said, "you've been at that table for 2 years. That's not—" "Noah tells you about his day before he tells me," Michael said. "Lily's got your handwriting. Your actual handwriting, the block capitals. She does it on purpose. She's been doing it since she was 8. He stood up off the bucket. "You want to know what I did on the 9th of June? For 4 years, I sat in a garage. And you want to know what I did this morning? I made pancakes, and Lily said they were fine, and Noah said they were fine. And then Noah said, and I'm quoting my son, 'Dad, don't tell Emma you made pancakes.'" Emma laughed with her whole wet face. He said it at 7 in the morning. At 6:24, Michael Carter crossed the back of a bakery and put his arms around a woman who had knocked on his door in the rain and asked for 4 hours indoors, and Emma Sullivan put her forehead in his shoulder, and neither one of them said anything for a long time. "I take up a lot of room," she said into his shirt. "Emma, I'm serious. I'm giving you fair—" "There's a room on the east side of that house," Michael Carter said. 9 by 11, insulated. Good window. I built it in 6 hours at 2 in the morning with a circular saw and a chalk line, and I have hated that drywall seam every day for 2 years, and I'd have built it 4 feet longer if I'd known you were staying." He held on. "So we'll build another one," he said. "That's all that is. That's the whole answer. We'll build another one, and it'll be too big, and you can take up every inch of it." They were married on the 2nd of October. Not the June, not the spring, not any date a normal person would pick. The 2nd of October, because that was the day she knocked, and Lily Carter, who was 11 by then and still had no filter and never would, stood up in front of 41 people and said, "3 years ago, a lady knocked on our door, and my dad said nobody comes here." 41 people laughed. "But she knocked 3 times, Lily said, "and my dad says nobody knocks 3 times for nothing." Carol Dunley cried. Tanya Boyd cried. Amir came in a suit. Cheryl Doan gave a speech about a recorder on a table and had to stop in the middle of it. Denise Whitlock, 25 years at the county, sat in the 4th row on her day off and did not have a clipboard for the first time in her adult life. Ray Dunley told 9 people about a 3-inch air gap. And Noah Carter, 16 years old, 6'2", stood up at the end with his hands shaking and said the only thing he'd prepared. "My mom died when I was 6, he said, "and my dad stopped building stuff. And then a lady came and slept in our storage room and put a bag over my mom's sewing machine so it wouldn't get rained on, and she didn't even know whose it was." He looked at his shoes. He looked up. "People say my dad saved her. That's on the internet. There's a video. That's what everybody says." He turned around and looked at his father. "He didn't," Noah said. "He was in that garage for 4 years, and he wasn't coming out, and everybody knew it and nobody said it. She knocked." The room was silent. "So don't say he saved her," Noah Carter said. "Say they got each other out. That's the real thing. That's what actually happened." Michael Carter put his hand over his eyes, and Emma Sullivan, 41 years old, in a dress she'd bought and not apologized for, stood up in a room full of people who had come out of their houses for her on a Tuesday in December, and did not make herself smaller for a single second of it. She had asked for one night. She got the rest of her life, and she earned every hour of it standing up out loud in a room she never once had to leave,